Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Centurion Leadership Battalion podcast. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. Again, Elena's still out. Congrats to Elena. She's now a new mom, so that's pretty awesome. So, prayers and thoughts out to Elena, everyone listening in. That's pretty cool. So, we're moving on with the pillars of leadership. I think it's important that we discuss them. The last three that we went over, experience, exposure, and education, are all the three foundations of greatness and great leaders, where we're sort of moving on now to excellence and excellent leaders. And we're going to be starting to stack up what are really these skills. Where do we learn these foundations? When are they important? And you can see that the first three, it's important that they continue your entire life. I would say most of them, you want that. But the first three in particular, and they're important that those foundations happen in those early years, like up to the age of 22, or if we're not, at least through college, that we really try to explore those things and ingrain in our children those leadership skills. What it means to have an education, inside and outside of formal education. What it means to learn from a book in that sense. What does it mean to expose yourself to the world? When we go on trips as a family, are we exposing ourselves to the world, or are we getting away from the world? That's an interesting question. Are we getting away from the world, or are we exposing ourselves to the world so we fit into it more and thus have more calmness in our normal life and don't need the same type of vacation to escape for everything because we're more a part of the world we live in? That would be exposure. And then experience is leadership, whether we get it through sports, activities, community service, music, whatever that is, the experience we start to gain of leadership or experience in the skill sets that we want to do, whether it's math, science, music, business. It's important in those formative years, obviously. And we need to know what those are in kids and let them explore it, right, in our children, because we don't want to cap their potential. Why? When we want the most for them, will we go and put our fears on them and cap them? So those are the hardest ones. I mean, greatness is so few and far between leaders because those three elements don't exist. And I can tell you I have leaders all around me and people in leadership positions all the time, but few and far between ever exemplify all three of these things, let alone the next bunch of E's we're going to talk about that you need to build into your leadership toolbox or armory. So that being said, let's move on. Today's topic, if you read the title of the podcast, is ego. And of course, ego gets a bad name in modern society, particularly in the United States, because it has a lot of, the person, won't see other people's point of view. They don't listen. There's all of those things, okay? That is true. Ego used to protect oneself from insecurities is not a positive ego. That's not what we're talking about here. There's ways to take that same ego that we talk about and develop it into something more. And how do we do that? Well, we start with the first three things we just discussed. The education, the exposure, the experience. Okay? Through doing those things, and hopefully by the time you're 22, like mowing lawns, working in a restaurant, getting customer service, playing sports, going to school, finding education outside of it, traveling as a family, educating in that travel, experiencing in that travel, getting exposure in that travel, that you start to develop a healthy ego, not one that protects you from your own insecurities, but one that is able to battle those insecurities because they have the confidence of experience, exposure, and education compared to their peers. And it's not meant to, because this is a delicate part. This is why it's the next step. This is why it's number 4, because if you have those things, this is a delicate way to determine who you are as a character. Because at this turn in the road, it determines your leadership if you really do these things. And there are a lot of people that I've also been around that develop these 3 skills, and then the ego gets involved and the insecurities, and they bury their business and they bury their stuff. It happens more than we think. And it's why all of a sudden great leaders or people that have led us all of our lives or into their later years suddenly are all of a sudden bad leaders. That ego flares. Okay? And it's because they haven't really successfully developed the rest of the E's after the ego, because they got stuck at ego, the fourth one out of all 18 of them. I think there's going to end up being 21 based on, as I've grown, I've discovered some more. But for now, 18. Okay, so that's a long way to go if you get stuck at 4. I've seen it in a lot of my mentors I've outgrown. It's seen it in my own family members. If you can't get by the ego part, you can't keep going. And so if you can't get by it, it's impossible, because the ego is such an essential role. And when you start to gain confidence, which is your ego, it determines whether that confidence breaks down insecurities or protects you from them. And I think that's pretty straightforward to everyone. And if you want to continue to build a healthy ego, it takes building the next steps of leadership, not only the next 2 within excellence, but the ones that go beyond it, because there's a lot more importance, and there's a lot of pieces in the human character, especially because our ultimate purpose and goal is leadership. The Bible, which I'm more familiar with, it's layered with leadership. It's the whole point. The purity of the human is how well we lead, how well we prepare the next generation to be better us, and how well we prepare our fellow man to grow, man and woman. So when we hit essential stages where we really have to think about them, which is why I layer them in groups of 3, with each layer, in my opinion, and based on the history, some of the characters we're already talking about, great leaders from the past, I use in this particular podcast, I'm using deceased leaders, because we can get a full assessment of their life all the way to the end. And that ego piece, which I'm talking about right now, most leaders who are great miss this, and they really become not great leaders in the end because of this ego trait. Because it's not harnessed properly, because 4th is missed. Even if they skip it and try to skip to, another stage like exercise, which is higher up in the chain of leadership skills, or steps, however you want to look at it, it doesn't mean that the steps aren't fluid once you learn them, that you can't float back and forth, but you have to learn them in a certain way, because the ego, again, in this particular case, to move into the next 3, this ego plays a part to even get to the next 18 things of leadership, character traits, things we need to work on. All of them do tie together, trust me. So, that being said, what is it that I'm insecure about? We have to be real, and sometimes we don't even know. Okay, I'm insecure about business, whether my businesses do well. I think it's hard for me to have that happen when I feel that they don't reflect who I am morally and ethically, and it affects my ego, and there's an insecurity there where my ego should have the confidence that I can go in and do change, okay? It's something that I have to work on always. I have to keep that ego in check. Is it an insecurity, or is it that I'm actually trying to do well? And that all comes down to motive, guys. What's my motive? And then I can put my ego in check. Am I doing this for the benefit of the people around me, and the employees and the vendors and the people that I lead, or the community? Is there a holistic benefit? Including me, it's okay to have a little bit of selfishness in there, because there has to be a benefit to you, or to your legacy, or to your leadership, or to your growth, because that's also part of the deal. There's an exchange there. It's not just give without getting anything in return, right? And I'm not saying to do it for something in return. I'm just saying knowingly you're doing it for growth. That's the return. It's essentially important. And one of the things is I've had to go back and check this ego thing for me, especially after COVID, growing into Milledgeville. If you guys hear noises right now for this particular podcast, it's because I had to move the podcast recording to my home temporarily because we've had water leaks in the podcast room in the kitchen. Bad news, right? Not good. But you can't record with equipment and have electronics and stuff in a room that's literally the ceiling is watering down on you. So, like, your ego has to go and check, is the equipment as good? No. Do I have all my stuff? No. Does it frustrate me? Does it make me feel like everyone's going to see it differently? Sure. Exposed right now. But I'm learning that the last 2 years in Milledgeville, the humbling, the group of team members that we have here, the managers that we have, the things that I've learned about ego in all levels of a business and entrepreneurship and in a community, including politicians and farmers, and all of the role and where leadership goes wrong, always comes down to this step. And when people are in it hustling and trying to just see dollar signs over people's heads, and I'm only in this, what is this customer worth right now? That's ego. If I'm building a long-term relationship knowing that there's mutual benefit to both of us and possibly someone else like a vendor or both of our employees, aka team members, that works well. If both companies do well, we're not trying to just take one over on each other, and we both grow and there's a relationship there, and even we're growing other people in a triangle, the employees, the vendor, whoever, the client, the customers. Guys, that's a good motive. That keeps our egos in check. Are we building this business because it's good for us? Those businesses don't last. And trust me, from firsthand experience that I'm living, those that have egos to protect themselves from insecurities are not doing things for the right reasons. They turn into bullies. They turn into aggressors. They try to spin things on you like it's your ego or it's your thing, or because you're out there doing things that's you. If you're always positive and your motive is to be positive and do it for the right reasons, I know you can hurt people and I know you need to reassess and reflect, but genuinely your motive, you're doing it for the right reasons and you're trying to do it to do the right thing, which is one of our core values here on this podcast. It's also why I'm getting calmer right now and less anxiety as I get on this podcast. I've started to reassess, making sure that I know why I'm doing it. And I have confidence suddenly that I've never had before here in Milledgeville and at FSP. That as long as I'm doing this for the right reasons and my motives to grow the individuals around me and the people around me is not about me. It's about the growth of everyone in the company and the vendors and the employees, because we all need to survive and have jobs. And in order to do that, we need to grow. It's important. But I will tell you something that I've learned, especially right now, especially in my business, especially since I've changed the way I do things and I'm spending many more hours and I work with the night shift here a lot at FSP in Milledgeville and built to teams hands-on in learning, is that ego is one of the worst things if it's not used properly and it's not understood in the individual and we don't understand our insecurities. It can wreak havoc in our lives and in our businesses and the people we work with. So what I've learned is that individuals that don't grow, that don't continue to seek experience, exposure, and education have an ego problem. And that ego does turn into bullying. It turns into inappropriate behavior towards others. And the individuals that come at me, I can tell you by the level of upset I am whether or not they're coming at me and their motive is self-gain or actually to help those around them or hurt them or tear them down. And if anyone normally sees me lose my temper or get upset, it really has to do with tearing down individuals. me, the individuals around me, people, for no reason, because we all have potential, because we all make mistakes, because we're all humans. So if the ego's not in check, it's what separates the boys from the men, honestly, or the girls from the women, or whatever you want to say. Because the reality is this: that ego, the reason you do things, how are you helping your clients? How are you helping your customers? Is it for the money? Or is it because you're actually providing solutions that help people in the long run, that there can be continuous gain on, because then the money just comes. And being inside companies that chase money and chase the short-term gain and discount because they think it makes the customer happy to discount, all you're doing is destroying your businesses, your vendors, your employees, yourself, and the people around you. It's bad business, and it's all because your ego, because you want to look good and you don't want to upset someone and you're afraid of conflict. So I've seen ego do the worst things. Ego, when not checked, it leads to sabotage. And people are like, oh, no, people don't do that. Well, when you work for a company that does nothing, and I know there's a lot of stuff all over the internet about people not working and showing it and how proud they are taking advantage of these companies, that is sabotage. That's stealing. That's taking it advantage of. And everything everyone wouldn't want to happen to them, they are doing to that business. And not only doing that to that business, but to their fellow employees. And why do they do it? Ego. Why are they sharing it? Show they got away with it. Why? Ego of popularity. It's a bad thing, man. Bad, bad, bad. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for all the love everyone gives. I appreciate everyone's patience as we've worked through this Centurion Leadership Battalion project and podcast and shot out a lot of episodes almost at a feverishly rate. And now that we've had some time in Atlanta and we've had a pause and a reassessment, we're going to have better things coming for everyone. But these pillars of leadership, our core values, our character, it reflects into our business. And if we're the leader and the entrepreneur, whatever our egos, damages, and our insecurities, we're going to attract those same things into our business. And it's going to compound. And believe me, I watch it happen around me all the time, where the leaders that are in place attract the similar traits because they think that that's what's going to make them win because they're the same as them. And if the people around you can't take criticism or anything other than that's the same as you, your business will go down the tubes because it will never adjust for COVID. Trust me, I know firsthand. If you don't adjust and you don't have people that grow because their ego and insecurities are too scared to try new things, to take a chance, to go be something different, and they haven't grown in 3 to 5 years, it means the individuals around them that they're supposed to be managing and leaders aren't growing because they're not growing. Therefore, your business is not growing. Shocking. And it's happening everywhere, particularly in the United States. We're getting our butt kicked by those that are doing it. And business management is so bad right now. The education, the experience, the people that are teaching it, the humans that are being taught it aren't getting the right stuff from the humans that should be teaching it because they don't have the experience to properly teach it. Because you know what business management is? Growth of humans at your own expense. It's putting the ego aside always. And knowing that your ego is the confidence you gain by growing other people and by putting your own ego in check. The bad one, not the good one. I appreciate everyone. I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate the love, and I know I get a little intense, but it's because I care, and I know that's hard for people to believe. But if anyone knows emotions and everyone wants everyone to control them, and I get it, being a good leader is having emotional intelligence, and we'll talk about that too. But passion is what keeps us going. Belief in those around us and dreaming big is what we want. But having that healthy ego that goes along with an education, experience, and exposure on a consistent everyday basis from the day we're born to the day we die is huge. Because if you don't do those things, you can't keep the ego in check. And you can't healthily do the rest of the E's. At this time, the 14 other ones. So, good day. Thank you guys. Hope everyone's enjoying their summer. Hope everyone's staying healthy. And I hope everyone's exploring themselves and exploring their own egos and insecurities. It's hugely important for your growth. Have a good one, guys. Thank you.